Senate hearings right now. Let me just hang on. Let me just hit my go live option here on TikTok. I'm sorry, on Instagram, if I can. Okay, so we're live here, and let me just bring up my live stream on Substack, and then we should be good to go. Welcome everybody. I hope you're all doing well today. I am bouncing through. I am going back and forth between two different Senate hearings right now. One that you're seeing right now on the screen over here is the Senate hearing for Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, John Ratcliffe. It's the FBI director, the director of national intelligence, and FBI director, national intelligence, and CIA director are testifying on Capitol Hill here, and then I'm bouncing back and forth. This is Senator psychopath Mark Wayne Mullen, and he is, he may wind up being the village idiot Donald Trump's new Secretary of Homeland Security, God forbid, which I fear might be a thing after watching this hearing for the last half hour. And so I'm going sort of back and forth. So let's listen in. We're going to go back to I really don't want to, this is Senator Joni Ernest. I could care less what she has to say. So let's listen in to John Cornyn, who is in a tough primary runoff election against MAGA nut, Trump's MAGA nut, who is the Attorney General, Tom Paxton. Is it Tom Paxton or Tim Paxton? I don't know, of Texas. And so Cornyn has to out crazy the craziest of the MAGA crazies, even though he was once sort of moderate and sane. And let's listen in for a few minutes to see how he's doing that in this particular hearing. And like I said, we'll bounce back and forth.
Your cooperation and collaboration with Homeland Security investigations in countering terrorist attacks against the United States?
Thank you, Senator. Absolutely. It is essential that the FBI cooperates with the entire interagency. But as to your question about DHS specifically, what we have stood up around the country are 59 Homeland Security task forces in 59 separate locations.
These are joint terrorism task forces?
Essentially, the JTTF model was expanded. So the FBI owns 56 joint terrorism task forces in each of our field offices. On top of that,
except that Kash Patel fired almost everybody in the joint terrorism task force. So because he was mad at them and for retribution.
And what that allows us to do is things like we did down in New Orleans just over the holiday period, where we surged for a 6-week period of time.
So Corden right here is trying to give some cover, some shade for nitwit Kash Patel. Kash Patel fired almost all of the FBI's counterterrorism experts, certainly the leadership in every one of those departments, Let me repeat, in every one of those counterterrorism departments, in vengeance for Donald Trump, because a lot of those FBI agents were also assigned to investigating the village idiot after the January 6th insurrection, where idiots like Kash Patel and people who like him and follow him tried to take over the government. So Cornyn now seems to be trying to give him a little bit of shade, I guess, to be able to cover up the cover-up. So just wanted to share that little bit of background. Let's listen to Kash Patel, sort of weasel around this as well, pontificating his babbling bundle of bullshit. Kash, you have the floor.
We dropped the murder rate by double-digit points.
We dropped the murder rate.
First time that Mardi Gras in its entire history had not one homicide. So when you bring the powers of the Homeland Security folks, DHS, and the FBI together, this is the purpose of it, to get after not just the terrorism threat, but the violence and the criminal activity in our cities. And that's why we're in 59 cities across the country, and it's working in places like Memphis and every other city we have it.
Are you aware of the fact that Homeland Security investigation is a major directorate within Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And are you aware that Senate Democrats have uniformly voted not.
Okay, just to interrupt, because I never feel like it's inappropriate to interrupt John Cornyn, especially these days since he's become one of the king MAGA ass kissers, because he's trying to beat Paxton in the primary and trying to as I said, out crazy the craziest of the MAGAs. But I've been watching both these hearings. We're going to bounce back to the other hearing in just a moment. But it seems like that in the other hearing, in this hearing, where Joni Ernest right now is questioning Mark-Wayne Mullen, the Republicans are doing two things. And I'm going to relate this back to the other hearing in a second. The Republicans are doing two things. They're to try to make Mullen seem like he's not the sociopath that he actually is. One, they're trying to make Mullen appear to be a good family man. And he seems like he is. He seems like he's a good dad. They talk about that a lot, and a good husband. So they're trying to make Mullen appear to be a normal person in that sense, to normalize him, even though we've seen Mullen advocate violence on the Senate floor itself. The second thing, to get back to what Cornyn is doing right now, is Republicans in the House and now chicken shit GOP Republicans in the Senate are actively and aggressively focused on trying to blame Democrats for the entire Department of Homeland Security shutdown. What the fuck that has to do with somehow making Mark-Wayne Mullen seem like he's not a nutcase is beyond me, but it seems to be effective for them. So they're trying to push that political message. Now, Democrats have... there were at least 2 or 3 bills just this week where Democrats offered to open, to fund DHS and other, offered to fund TSA and other FEMA and other Department of Homeland Security departments, just not ICE, because they weren't interested in funding the ICE Gestapo, because they've been killing people. Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and most Americans are in agreement that we don't want to fund the murder of American citizens, and we're really not that interested in these subsequent murders that we know about of non-U.S. citizens. We just don't like that, right? So the Republicans across the board, I guess, to try to improve their chances to keep the village idiot Donald Trump happy and to improve their chances of somehow, some way, not having a political slaughter in the midterms, the Republicans are trying to push this narrative that the Democrats are keeping DHS shut down and you're less safe, right? So in both of these hearings, in this hearing and the one that we were just listening to with Kash Patel babbling, Cornyn is now bringing up that political talking point that has nothing to do with the hearing itself, but is still, the intention, the political intention at the moment. So let me just check and see where if Joni Ernest is still babbling, so I don't care about that. And by the way, for those of you that are just joining me, this is not a fair and balanced assessment of these. A lot of times when I go live, I do like to cover in real time these political hearings. I usually don't do 2 at a time simultaneously, but these two just have the potential to be very entertaining. So I happen to be covering them at the same time. But if you're looking for a fair, reasonable, and balanced assessment where, I actively listen to what the Republicans in either case have to say, this is not where you're going to find that. I am so tired of Republicans gaslighting, bullshitting, engaging in the utter stupidity, ignorance, and catastrophic policy making of the village idiot Donald Trump, covering these sycophantic, cowardly weirdos, chicken shit GOP senators and crazy and pretend crazy GOP members of the House, that when I covered these particular hearings, I'm not interested in a fair and balanced coverage. I don't care anymore what the Republicans have to say, because there is no, like most of the American electorate that has consistently voted to provide Democrats an opportunity to overperform in election after election after election since the village idiot Donald Trump was inaugurated on January 20th, 2025, as most Americans are tired of the bullshit that's and the catastrophic consequences of the country having made the mistake of electing the simpleton for a second time. I don't have the patience anymore for the Republicans' perspective on any of this. So when I cover these particular hearings, I cover them from the perspective of listening to what the Democrats have to say, seeing if they're adequately in my humble opinion, for whatever that's worth, if they're adequately grilling and pushing on these representatives from the Trump administration and commenting on it and going from there. So I just wanted to add that little disclaimer before we continue, so folks really know what what they're getting into if they're watching this particular live. Anyway, let's bounce over to Ernest is still talking, so let's go back to Kash Patel.
To fund the Department of Homeland Security, including Homeland Security investigations, TSA, FEMA, and other functions of the Department of Homeland Security?
Senator, I'm aware that employees of DHS are 1 month without pay.
They're not being paid, right?
Yes, sir.
And we were all seeing what's happening at airports where people are having to wait hours at a time because of the fact that these TSA agents are overburdened. But what I wanted to focus on with you is the refusal to fund the functions of the Department of Homeland Security, including Homeland Security investigations, making Americans less safe?
Absolutely.
No, it's not. What's making Americans, ironically, Cornyn, as he's interviewing Kash Patel, what might be making Americans less safe, that Cornyn doesn't have the courage, the common sense, or the willingness to ask Kash Patel would be, why did the director of the FBI lay off all senior leadership across the board of the FBI, especially the counterterrorism department, just because those people they were involved in the January 6th investigation of the village idiot Donald Trump? Cornyn might want to ask if Americans are less safe if Kash Patel is busy, using one of the FBI jets to fly him to go see his girlfriend and his girlfriend to come see him. Is the FBI less safe if the director of the FBI is out of the country during the Olympics, pouring fucking beer all over himself, drinking beer and getting sloshed with the American hockey team after they won a gold medal? Is the U.S. less safe with a fool like Kash Patel being the FBI director? That might be more appropriate questions. Well, is the United States less safe? Months and months ago, when a sniper in Texas shot 3 migrants that were shackled, that were being led into a detention center. I don't remember if it was Galveston. Fact check me on it. I don't remember what town it was in. And Kash Patel couldn't wait to get onto the scene. And within almost 2 hours of the shooting, Kash Patel takes a picture of bullets that he said were used in the actual attack. And he told us that the attacker engraved anti-ICE messages on the bullets. And then he shows us a picture. I was watching this real time. We were live, real time when this was happening. And you could clearly see that somebody wrote with a blue Sharpie on these fucking bullets these supposed anti-ICE messages. Would that be so that and would that be the kind of thing that that would make Americans less safe? But Cornyn can't go there because Cornyn can't worry about Americans being safe right now. Cornyn has to be as MAGA as he possibly can be. He has to be as crazy and extreme as he possibly can be, so he has a snowball's chance of hell of winning the primary and defeating Ken Paxton. I said Tim Paxton before, but it's Ken. Before we listen to, I think that's Senator Angus King. I just want to see who's speaking to Mark Wayne Mullen. Oh my God, Joni Ernest is still babbling to Mullen. So let's listen to King and see what he's talking about.
I'd like to ask Ms. Gabbard and Director Radcliffe, Director, both of you, were either of you in the room or your designees when the president was making the final decision about taking this action against Iran on February 27th, 28th? Was there an intelligence committee intelligence community present in those deliberations. Mr. Ratcliffe, your response?
Senator King, I'm probably in dozens and dozens of briefings with the president. I don't know if there was a single meeting where there was a single time where a decision.
That's CIA Director John Ratcliffe.
Were those dozens of meetings right during the lead up to this war? I know you've met many times, but I'm talking about it in the 2 weeks or so before the decision to go into Iran was made.
Again, countless meetings with the president.
During that period?
During that period.
Director Gabbard, were you present in those discussions?
Likewise, yes.
The reason I'm asking the question is there seems to be a discrepancy between what the intelligence community has reported over the years and what the president has said in terms of of this action. For example, Senator Wyden read the report from a year ago that strikes against neighboring states and action to close the Strait of Hormuz was predicted by the intelligence community. And yet the president says nobody knew. And my question is, did you tell him? Anybody want to answer that question?
Senator, I'll answer the question. So with regard to briefings, the president gets briefings constantly about intelligence. Now, the comments that you talked about, I had not heard, but what I can tell you is that Iran had specific plans to hit U.S. interests in energy sites across the region, and that's why the Department of War and the Department of State took measures
there
for
is no
force
Department of
protection
War,
and personnel protection in advance of Operation Epic Fury. I think that's what's most important.
Any predictions to the president about the Strait of Hormuz? All you got to do is look at a map, and you'll see that the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz. Was that part of the briefing, Director Gabbard?
I think the Director Ratcliffe made the point here is that this has long been an assessment of the IC that Iran would likely hold the Strait of Hormuz as leverage.
And my question is, was that communicated to the president in the lead up to this action?
And it's because of that longstanding assessment that the IC has continued to report that the Department of War took the preemptive planning measures that it did.
Well,
preemptive
they've stated that they did not plan for the Strait of Hormuz. The president said, who knew that was going to happen? Anyway, let's move on. Does the president take a daily brief from the intelligence community? This is a yes or no question, I think.
Yeah, the president, I would say, Senator, in my estimation, on average, I brief the President of the United States on intelligence probably on average 10 to 15 times a week, where I have conversations with him about specific, discrete issues. Sometimes there are dedicated sessions that last hours in length. Sometimes I'm briefing him on specific issues, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. But I would say on average, my interactions where I'm briefing the president on important national security matters happens probably on average 10 to 15 times per week.
Thank you. Could you update us on the intelligence on Russian intelligence sharing with Iran in the current conflict? What do we know?
Senator, if there is that sharing going on, that would be an answer that would be appropriate for a closed session.
Well, it's been in the public press. This is open source that it's occurring. Is it occurring?
Again, if it is occurring, that would be an answer appropriate for a closed session. What I can tell you is that according to the Department of War, any support that Iran may be receiving is not inhibiting their operational effects.
Okay, that's sort of the first cousin of a yes, I guess. According to intelligence analysis, can regime change or the elimination of the estimated 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium be accomplished without boots on the ground?
Senator, the discussion about the Iranian nuclear capability, we intend in the closed session to talk about that in great deal. With regards to revealing any information about the ability to do that, I would have to defer that to closed session.
Okay, I'll see you in an hour. Finally, there was very little, if anything, in the report, in the assessment about climate change, and that's been in past reports. There is a lot of discussion about migration. The estimates are that climate migrants, because of the changes in the climate and the atmosphere, and particularly in the center equatorial area of the Earth, will range from 200 million to 1 billion people by 2050. Do you believe that is a national security threat that should be addressed? The Syrian refugees were about 6 million, and they upset the politics of Europe for several years. We're talking about 200 million to 1 billion people on the move. I believe that's something we should be discussing and that the intelligence community should be assessing. Director Gabbard?
Yes, Senator, there are a number of drivers of things like migration. It would be an extensive and voluminous annual threat assessment if we included every single one. This annual threat assessment is focused, again, on the priorities laid out by the President's national security strategy and on the effects that we can take action, operational action, to protect U.S. interests.
Well, I would suggest combating climate change is something we can take action on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, they're definitely. Yeah, Lacey's saying, and some other folks in the chat, that they're definitely nervous. I mean, you know, it's an incompetent confederacy of buffoons. Like, how do you not be nervous? And they're trying to cover a war that everybody hates. Not everybody, but most of America hates, and they are constantly trying to, beside the fact they are blatantly, patently incompetent, each and every one of them, from Tulsi Gabbard to John Ratcliffe to Kash Patel. I don't know about the generals there. I'm sure they probably are competent, but they're working in an incompetent environment, and they're all answering to a bumbling, fumbling imbecile, right? Donald Trump. So you have this kind of weird situation where they now have to come here in front of the Senate committee and defend an asinine war that is a fumbling, rumbling clusterfuck. And and you know, like, how do they respond to that? How do you not sit there, because you know, you're under oath, so you're not really allowed to lie. And I think Ratcliffe, I mean Patel, who I don't think he's got any conscience, decency, or common sense left, but how do you you know, how do you, you know, if you're Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, who probably have some semblance of concern about lying under oath because they know there could be a consequence in a subsequent administration, you know, how do you sit there and not, like, you know, how do you sit there and not be nervous? Let's just take a look and see who's speaking over on. Oh my God, how is Joni Ernest? Am I still speaking? That cannot even be possible. Let me see if I'm doing something wrong here. Let me just fast forward this a little bit. And if you're just joining us, I'm covering. Let's listen to Slotkin's. Let me just go backtrack a little bit. I want to hear. This is Mark Wayne Mullen's Senate confirmation hearing. And Alyssa Slotkin, I don't care about what Joni Ernest, retiring Republican senator from Iowa, has to say. It's can't be anything important, and I just couldn't really give a shit about what she has to say anyway. But Alyssa Slotkin, let's see if she. I haven't been impressed with the Democrats' questioning of Mullen thus far. It's been pretty milquetoast and lame, almost to the point where it might give Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski just enough cover to fucking vote for him, which is insane. But the strongest rebuke of the sociopath Mark Wayne Mullen so far actually was Rand Paul, the Republican chair of this committee. Anyway, let's see what Slotkin has to say. I hope she's stronger.
Anti-Semitic attack meant to terrorize.
Just back it up a little bit.
And that's where wisdom comes from. If you can also learn from your successes, then that's also where wisdom
blah,
comes
blah,
from.
blah,
and
blah,
that's
blah, blah,
considered
blah.
someone that
shut the fuck
has
up,
the
Mark.
potential
Let's
to
just get to
be a leader. And I would rather work
I can't
with those
let me
leaders
just shut him
like
up
that.
On this C-SPAN feed, it's really difficult to kind of fast forward and without sort of bouncing too far ahead into something. So let me see if Ernest is wrapping up her meaningless questioning.
Congressional delegation visits, folks.
Okay.
A lot in the 12 years
Thank
that
you,
I've been
Joni.
here.
All right, move
But
on.
to watch Senator Mullen lead this delegation.
You would love it.
And to be able to speak to
Yes.
someone that is far different than we are and bring our countries that closer together.
Oh.
I know that he will do that.
I
with
know he will.
every one of us serving
Okay.
in Congress.
Blah,
I
blah, blah.
know you will
Okay.
represent us very well. You will represent the administration
Yes,
very
you will.
well.
Lucky
you will make our
administration. All
country
right, get the
safer.
fuck out. All right.
So thank you,
All
Senator
right.
Mullen. Thank
All
you, Christy, very
right.
much for your friendship as well.
Yeah, thank you for
Mr.
being,
Chair.
a shitty
Senator
senator with
Slotkin.
no balls. Let's continue.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for our conversation yesterday. I want to just actually add on to what Senator Langford was saying and just focus on the attack we had at a temple that's very close to my heart in Michigan, place I know well. Last week, we had an anti-Semitic attack meant to terrorize not just that synagogue, but the entire Jewish community. And I think the light is really blinking red. And that is the feeling for the Jewish community. And just as an objective statement, the Jewish community is 10 times more likely to be the victim of a hate crime than all other religious groups combined. That's not a political statement. That's a factual statement from FBI data. We talked about the need to work together. The Jewish community is spending about $1 billion a year privately securing their own institutions. No religious group should have to spend that amount of money that could be going to lots of other things on their own security in the United States of America. So I would just ask your help in reforming the nonprofit security grant program so it's agile, so you don't have to win the grant and then still do 100 pieces of paper, maybe even looking at a rapid reaction fund, but certainly asking for some sort of task force. I'm thinking about the community in Australia that went to the Australian government, the Jewish community, and said, we're seeing just a real uptick in threats. We're terrified. And then we have Bondi
What the
Beach and a
Australians
very
did,
horrible
though, is they
thing.
put a
Can we just agree in public, again, in a
they put
bipartisan
an
basis,
assault weapons
to sit
ban in
together to
place
reform this
after
program and figure out how
their
we
most
manage
recent
to
mass
the
shooting.
threat, because we're not hitting it right now.
Senator, you have a wealth of knowledge from your service in the intel community, and you will know this issue probably better than me. And so I would welcome the opportunity to sit down and talk to you, figure out what we need to do. I know this is very personal to you, and that's great. We may have some differences on some political views, but this isn't one. You and I will be, laser focused and get this resolved if it's possible. But yes, I would absolutely welcome an opportunity to work with you on this.
Great, I appreciate that. I think, in general, your position or your future position as Secretary of Homeland Security sits at the fulcrum of these big issues we're having as a country. Just big cultural issues. The use of law enforcement in our streets and where our rights begin and end, and then our elections, our democracy. And given the importance of that, I think it's important that we state really clearly where you are on those two issues. I think first and foremost on the use of ICE. My state voted for Donald Trump in 2024. A lot of people supported the president's immigration agenda, but then they watched with their own eyes, not filtered through a news source. They watched with their own eyes American citizens killed in their streets for protesting. They saw children caught in the crossfire and being tear gassed. They saw people randomly being pulled out of their cars and walking down the streets because they happened to look like they could be an immigrant and checked for their papers, which for many of us has a real history. They have seen law enforcement go into people's homes without a judicial warrant for a country that was invented because we were being oppressed by a foreign force that demanded entry into our homes. So you say you don't want ICE in the news. You say you want to rebuild trust. Your predecessor was fired because she couldn't manage that, and people had to go in and bring the temperature down. Can you, without other words, just state clearly what you'd be willing to do to fundamentally reform ICE and put into law to do so, since that trust is gone.
Ma'am, as you know, I can't make the law. You guys make that for me.
But you're going to be the
I-
secretary.
Yes, I agree, but I can't make the law. I can work within
No,
the parameters.
but tell us what you'd be willing
yes.
to put into law.
So right now, the law that I work into is your guys' decision. We'll work through that. But I do believe there is a better approach. And I think working with municipalities, I would love to see ICE become a transport more than the front line. If we can get back into just simply working with law enforcement, we're going to them and we're picking up these criminals from their jail. One, we're going to reimburse them for having the person there. And have partnership is vitally important. I don't think there needs to be a law to change that. I think I can work within what is there. But there's an approach that can happen, but we got to have partners.
Yeah, I understand. But we're not going to agree to this here, but I would just say the ability, the trust is gone, and not just with Democrats. That's why we're here. That's why your predecessor was fired. And there needs to be fundamental reform of this law enforcement agency. And I think that the public writ large is crying out for that. Let me turn to elections.
Senator,
let me turn to elections. The Department of Homeland Security has the mandate since the Obama era for securing our election infrastructure. That's an important job, and you'll be secretary. The president has continued to say that he won the 2020 election, even though there's been 60 court cases saying the opposite. He has said he wants to federalize the elections. He has said name-check cities, including Detroit. He has said voting machines are inaccurate. He has said in the State of the Union, I was on the Senate floor, paraphrase, that if his side doesn't win in November, then the elections were rigged, which is exactly what he said 8 months before the 2020 election. You have your own history. You did not certify the 2020 election. There are people at the Department of Homeland Security, 3 people specifically, who are well-known election deniers now running election security functions. Who won the 2020 election?
Ma'am, we know that President Joe Biden was sworn into office. He was the president for the last 4 years.
But I do believe won the election?
My job as Department of Homeland Security Secretary will be to make sure that we assure that the elections are
Don't let him speak.
fair
I just
and
want to
people
see
can trust
Slotkin's
them.
questions are good. I agree,
Does the federal government
Lacey.
run the elections process, or do states?
But you just let him
It's
off the
very
hook.
clear in the Constitution that the states control state elections, and then there is some federal oversight that's on it, but the federal government can set some standards. So if you're talking about the Save American Act, requiring you, which is within the Constitution, by the way, requiring individuals to be citizens of the United States, I don't think it's too much to ask somebody to prove they're a citizen of the United States.
That's
to vote
not what
in a
we're
federal
talking about.
election.
I'm talking about administering the elections. If you are Secretary of Homeland Security, do you feel you have the authority to put uniformed officers at polling locations in 2026?
Ma'am, we said this in your office. The only reason why my officers would be there if there was a specific threat for them to be there, not for intimidation. And
So
I said
even though we
would be able
didn't
to
need
share
it
that.
during World War II, we didn't need it during Vietnam or the War on Terror, we never had to put uniformed military there. Now, you feel that there's going to be a reason that there's going to be an armed threat to the United States that you
No,
need to
ma'am.
potentially
I
be
said
there?
I can't sit there and guarantee hypothetically of what threat would be and not. I'm not putting military. That's not within my purview.
Uniformed
Yes,
officers.
but if there is a threat, a specific threat, say it's in a Jewish community, and there is a threat that's specific to that polling area, then we will work with local law enforcement. There'll be a reason for us to be there, and it'll be known why we're there.
I think the reason you're here and not Kristi Noem is because Americans trust their local law enforcement now way more than they trust ICE. So I would just say, if we ever get to the point where you are being asked to put armed ICE officers at polling locations, we have lost the plot as a country. We have fundamentally lost it. And until I hear someone tell me that this man, President Trump, will actually allow us to have a free and fair election, there is zero trust here, and I cannot trust that he won't try and steal it. Again, I yield back.
I think Slotkin's questions were pretty strong so far. I mean, I haven't watched the whole hearing, but they were next to Rand Paul. I think she had the strongest set of questions. I would have preferred. Look, she's a senator. I'm not. So who the hell, right? Who gives a shit what I would prefer. But I would have preferred that that she didn't let him off the hook with the who won the 2020 election question. I would have liked to see her kind of drill down, hammer that question harder and harder and harder, and just keep asking it. Just press them up against the wall, because you've got to expose the crazy. And that's the one thing that the Democratic senators thus far, as I've been watching this hearing sort of on and off over the last couple hours, they're not effectively expressing the crazy. There's been a lot of information that the Republicans have been able to bring out that he's a good dad, and he seems like a good dad, that he's got a good family, and that he's a good husband. But who the fuck gives a shit if you're an emotionally unstable, pseudo-violent man who tried to actually pick a fight in the halls of the Senate, in the Senate chamber, with a guy who you didn't like what he said about you, right? If you were standing up literally during a Senate hearing and you were the ranking member and you were literally standing up, taking your ring off because you were going to start swinging on the Senate floor, the only one so far that has pushed that narrative, was at the very beginning of this hearing, was Republican Senator, the chairman of this committee, Rand Paul. And I don't know why Democrats, although Slotkin did a pretty good job, I'm glad she brought the anti-Semitism issue up, because that's certainly something all of us that are Jewish, there's no doubt that we're facing horrific anti-Semitic threats every minute of every hour of the day now from people who are inspired by Islamic fundamentalism, directly related now to the stupid fucking war in Iran that this idiot dragged us into, and even a larger threat of anti-Semitism, where 99.9% of the anti-Semitic attacks here in the United States have been from angry, middle-aged white men or young, raging white men, right? Just angry white men who don't like Jewish people, right? And that anti-Semitic reality coming from both areas is something that Jews are having to face and deal with, no question. And I'm glad that here in the U.S., and I'm very, very glad she brought that up. I don't expect that Mark Wayne Mullen or anybody that they put up for that position wouldn't have given her the answer that they wanted. But Mark Wayne Mullen is showing us when she hammered him and started sort of pushing him for specific answers of how are you going to reform ICE, where you can show his lack of curiosity, creativity, or fitness for this particular job. He came up with the same dumbass, dumbfuck, uncreative answer that you, me, or anybody else could have come up with. Well, we're gonna have more coordination with the local police. Really, Mark? Really, Mark Wayne? And then that just leads naturally to the sanctuary cities argument between the Republicans and the Democrats. I mean, yes, there should be more coordination with local police, but that's not what the fuck she's talking about. And the thing is, you don't have an answer. And it's not even Mark Wayne Mullen's fault, because as much as Mark Wayne Mullen, I think, shouldn't have this position because I think he's a sociopath, right? I think he's got a terrible anger management problem. I don't think he's a sociopath. I think he's got a terrible anger management problem that I think he needs therapy for. As much as that renders him unqualified, I think he's just fucking unqualified. He's a plumber. He had a plumbing business. In America, nothing wrong with it. A plumber can become a senator. Shit happens. He was a successful small businessman. He was able to become a senator. Amen. Anybody can be qualified to be a senator. But to be the director of the Department of Homeland Security, the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, no. I love my plumber. He is outstanding. I've known him for years. I would trust my plumber to watch my kid, to watch my house if I'm out of town. I would hire my plumber for a plethora of things. But neither me nor my plumber should be the fucking director of Homeland Security, because we don't know shit about that job. So Mark Wayne Mullen's disqualifications are, one, that he's a nutcase, and two, that he's a plumber, right? I mean, is it me? Maybe. What time is it now? It's 11:57. This is Ashley Moody, by the way, senator from Florida, who is competing, in my opinion, with Senator Tommy Tuberville to be the dumbest U.S. senator in the Senate. She is, in my opinion, a little bit crazy. She's a little bit stupid. I'm just saying that. Very low. She's a very low IQ person. Let's see what's happening over here before we wrap this live in just a few moments. It looks like we had a freeze up over here. That sucks. Let me just reconnect over to here, and we're going to have to sit through. Hang on, a couple seconds of a commercial, and we'll just see who's asking the questions. Oh, Mark Kelly. Let's hear what Kelly's asking.
And that means more money into the coffers of Vladimir Putin. Would you agree that if he has more funding, he is likely to put that to his war effort against Ukraine? Director Gabbard.
I would defer to an actual intelligence assessment on what they would believe his intentions are.
Director Ratcliffe?
Yeah, I wouldn't speculate on that.
Wouldn't speculate? Okay. Okay. And is it accurate that China is continuing to receive preferential oil flows from Iran despite the conflict, as Iran allows its own tankers to transit the strait? Director Gabbard? I'm going to go back and forth between the two of you.
There has been some reporting of China, India, and other countries being able to move their tankers through the strait. However, it is unclear the volume or the measure of that.
Okay, so it sounds like it's accurate. Thank you. I'm going to move on. Director Gabbard, you tweeted yesterday that President Trump concluded there was an imminent threat and made a decision to attack Iran after carefully reviewing all of the information before him. I think the country deserves to know what the information was. I'm going to ask a series of questions and just want a yes or no. We don't need any explanation, just yes or no, starting with, were you asked, I'm not asking if you did brief this, were you asked to brief on whether Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz?
I'm not going to comment on what the president did or didn't ask me on any topic.
I'm not asking if you briefed it. I'm just asking if there was a request.
I understand
by the White
that.
House. Director Ratcliffe, were you asked to brief on whether Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz?
The briefings to the president of the White House typically don't come at the request of the White House. So typically when we get intelligence that we want the president to be aware of, the intelligence community brings that to the president.
Did you produce the analysis for the Straits of Hormuz?
There has been and continues to be analysis with respect to that.
Were you asked to brief on how our adversaries and allies would respond to the war in Iran? I imagine I'll get the same answer. So it's just to point out here, it's challenging to forget about actually what was in the brief for a second. We're having a hard time finding out not only if you briefed the president on something, but even if the White House asked if they could be briefed on something or if analysis was produced. So I just want to point out here, this is about 6 days.
Can I comment on
Yes.
that?
Yes.
I go back.
Wait, I'm just pausing it because I know this is an interesting interaction. But I would love to hear a question. And Mark Kelly's not the guy he has too much dignity. Like, I wish I was a senator for 5 minutes. I would like to hear ask the question, did you brief the president on the situation in the Straits of Hormuz, and was he capable of understanding it? Because remember, they're under oath. In your opinion, did Donald Trump understand the briefing that you presented to him? And I would love to hear them try to lie but not lie about the fact that he certainly was incapable of comprehending anything that they told him. Just a little side note.
Point. It's the same approach that we took to the prior operations, which, to your credit, Senator, you have praised the intelligence and military communities in Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Absolute Resolve. It's the same approach and the same professionals in terms of how they approached this particular operation.
We're trying to figure out if the president knew what the downside was of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And I'm having a hard time finding out whether the White House asked or whether there was a brief, whether the president knew. Did he know this was going to happen, or did he just disregard it? And I just want to point out something that was released about 6 days ago. This is a fundraising email from the president.
Yes.
From the president of the United States. And in this email here, where there's multiple links to donate money, it says, as a national security briefing member, you'll receive my private national security briefings. Director Gabbard or Director Radcliffe, do you think the public should be able to, supporters of the president should be able to pay and receive his private national security briefings? I assume these are briefings, Director Radcliffe, that you provide to the president that is now going to be provided to somebody who makes a
Regardless
donation.
of what that I don't know what that document is, but regardless of what it says, it didn't happen.
Oh, no, this is new.
Just came out.
What
I
I'm
saw
telling
it.
you is that the Hatch Act would prevent me from in an apolitical role from engaging in that. I'm not aware that anything like that happened.
Yeah, this says unfiltered updates. So, Director Gabbard, do you have any comment on whether unfiltered updates of private national security briefings should be made to individuals that donate to the president?
I'm not familiar with that document.
Of course not.
It's been made very public 6 days ago. We'll get you a copy here because I agree with you, Director
We'll get you a
Radcliffe,
copy.
that the Hatch Act should prohibit this type of conduct. Thank you.
Senator Langford joins us from what I gather is a very exciting confirmation hearing for Senator Mullen.
Do not really give a shit about Langford. So anyway, let's see who's questioning. Mark Wayne Mullen. Let me just go a little bit forward. So let's just go. Hang on. Let me just get back to that, and we'll wrap up with him.
Talking about perspective, I'm talking about going back and the fact that we're using.
Let me just back up a little bit.
Different paths. I mean, think about it. I'm getting to live the American dream. You're telling me a kid from West Oklahoma with a speech impediment would ever be able to be here? That only happens in America. Only
very,
in
very
America.
heartwarming. And this got just such a down-home country boy, isn't he? A cowboy with a speech impediment who became a plumber and became a senator and almost had a chance to beat the shit out of a union boss on the Senate floor. That only happens in America. Only in America. An idiot. I can't.
And the fact that I'm here, my goodness.
All right, enough of that. I heard that once. I can't listen to that again.
Senator Gallego.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, neighbor. How you doing? Easy day.
Hey, brother. Good to see you.
So some very specific questions. What is the primary mission of Homeland Security investigations?
From the IG or from us?
I'm sorry, from Homeland Security Department. There's HSI is within Homeland
Right.
Security. What is their primary mission?
Well,
It's not a trick question either.
no, I understand that. And every agency, sir, we have specific missions that we are targeted to look at our aspect of protecting the homeland in different directions, have different paths. And in different agencies, region-wide, there are 22 of them there. We all need to be in the same boat, row in the same direction, working for one common goal. And as I said, that's protect the homeland, bring peace of mind, and secure the confidence of the American people.
Okay, so HSI, and being from Arizona, we're very familiar with CBP, ICE, and HSI. HSI specifically is very important because they specialize in dealing with human trafficking, human smuggling, counterfeit, bank fraud, things of that nature. Actually, I have a lot of friends that work for them forever. The reason I bring this up is because there is confirmed reports that the Secretary of Homeland Security has ordered HSI agents, pull them off what I just told you were very important missions, to go to Arizona and investigate the 2020 election results, right? That's a very big concern of mine because these agents should be doing the work they're doing. A lot of them already are, field ICE agents instead of actually doing these long-term investigations. But now they're not even doing the ICE enforcement. They're literally going back and looking into conspiracy theory. So, for my experience and seeing you both on the House and the Senate, do you believe that Joe Biden won Arizona in the 2020 presidential election? The reason I ask is because, again, you're potentially deploying HSI agents to Arizona to check a result using our taxpayer dollars to follow up on a conspiracy theory.
Sir, I'm not familiar with what the former secretary did here, and nor am I here to debate what happened in 2020. I do know that there's an opportunity to look at 2020 and make sure that anything that went wrong we can fix moving forward, because what we wanted to make sure is that in the next election, be it the midterms or in 2028, the American people trust our election system. Trust is vitally important. I want to always look at past mistakes and past successes, because I've addressed this multiple times, and I know everybody's busy here, and I know you didn't get to hear me earlier. But Senator, I think we can always do better, and I want to do that. Just like you and I, we've worked on immigration issues.
Oh my God, shut them up.
Because we both know we can do it better.
But you're
Senator,
talking about perspective. I'm talking about going
Yes.
back, and the fact that we're using Homeland Security funds, investigators that should be using their time and value more to check onto something that, by the way, had multiple independent audits, even one run by the Senate Republican and Senate State House representatives that passed accuracy tests, hand counts.
See, I like to talk, as you know. I like to hear myself talk. And so do U.S. senators. But this is where I think the senators are missing an opportunity. Right here, the senator needs to just ask him over and over again, did Donald Trump win the election in Arizona in 2020? Don't give us, we don't need all the bullshit. Everybody knows about them, but don't waste your time. Hammer him hard enough with the basic question that you're trying to get him to answer, and get him flustered, because your job here is this is not a campaign speech. Your job here as a senator, a Democratic senator, is to protect the homeland from the Department of Homeland Security being a nut, and you need to expose the crazy. That's just my opinion, but let's continue. And I love this particular senator. I just am not impressed with, they don't seem to learn. They need to sort of go Jasmine Crockett on these people. Jasmine, when she's interviewing someone and it's bullshit, she doesn't fuck around. She's like, Crockett gets in there, gets to the point, challenges them, hammers that point over and over again. When they refuse to answer it, she says, she doesn't say this, but she's like, fuck that, they're not going to answer. And they're not going to answer because they're full of shit, and they're crazy. I don't know why these senators cannot learn from Jasmine Crockett.
14 court cases that were confirmed that Biden won in my state. And so when I have personal friends that are HSI agents, friends that I know are telling me they are now being diverted from their duties, and what they're doing is they're instead of investigating child sex trafficking, child abusers, drug traffickers, which I don't disagree, we have not been doing the best at, and certainly I think a lot of that was under the Biden administration, did not do that sufficiently. But now, instead of it not being done, now we have the opposite, where some of these best trained people are being ordered by somebody within the.
This is what I'm talking about. He's just talking. He's just wasting his fucking time instead of just going at the witness. As I said, and they're going to get this, like they haven't learned their lesson. This idiot, if after watching this hearing, watching the weak efforts of our Democrats, somebody said who was it said we need fighters in the chat here? Lacey, she's right. We need Jasmine Crockett in here. We need Chris Murphy. He is a senator in here. We need people that are not going to beat around the bush. You get to the point and you hammer them. He is wasting his time and our time. And what they're doing is that what these Democratic senators are doing in this hearing, and I am feeling disappointed in them, because I do think this asshole is going to get confirmed after watching this hearing. I really do. I can't believe I'm saying that. But this idiot, this violent idiot, even after all that's happened, unless the news goes different, unless the news cycle reporting in the news cycle goes differently than what I think I'm seeing happening in this hearing. The weak efforts by the Democrats here to hold this nutcase. You're talking about a slam dunk. You have an idiot, a violent idiot, right? Who is going to lead the most loathed U.S. government department in the country right now, a department that murdered 2 U.S. citizens in cold blood, a department that is fucking shut down, and most of the country is behind the shutdown because there's such loathsome characters. They're a U.S. version of the Gestapo. That should be a slam dunk for senators, Democratic senators, and they're fucking this up, and they are going to. I tell you, as sure as my name is Mitch. This hearing is going to give Murkowski and Collins cover. They can afford to, right, Gamer Vet Dad? They can afford to lose 1 vote, right? And that's Rand Paul, because Rand Paul's never going to vote for that crazy motherfucker. Rand Paul, in the beginning of, if you didn't hear Rand Paul, in the beginning of this hearing, he went out. Let me show it to you, if I can. Let me see if I can go back to it. Let me see if I can find it for you guys. Let's see. Hang on.
Anybody else. But mistakes, if you own them, you can learn from them and you can move ahead.
Shut up. Let me see if I can find Rand Paul. Rand Paul was by far the strongest advocate for sanity. And I don't usually say that.
A lack of contrition, no apology, and no regrets.
Let me back it up a little bit.
That are on day 30 without pay, and they're still showing up every single day to do their job.
Now, just ignore his babble. And
that is a dedicated group of people.
You're an idiot. I don't have the patience.
And we should all be proud of them. We should all be working together, and we should all be trying to fund them. So I pray, seriously, I pray.
It's very hard to fast forward the C-SPAN feed.
That once this hearing is over and once we go through this process, I get it. I get some of it's got to be political theater. I understand it. I've had to really pray about my attitude.
He had to pray about his attitude.
But I will say, once it's over, I hope we can work together and get them funded. So when I walk in...
All right, shut the fuck up. We just want to hear Rand Paul.
Fortunate enough to be confirmed, if I walk in as secretary, that these guys are ready to go to work day 1. So God bless you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Now listen to Paul. Paul did the best. It's
the standard practice of this committee for the chairman to ask nominees the following question. Do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear or testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you're confirmed?
I do.
We'll now proceed to 7 minutes of questioning. The record should show, and I think will show, a lack of contrition, no apology, and no regrets for your support. You completely understand the violence that was perpetrated on me. You're unrepentant. The only thing you quibble about is whether I met you somehow when you were in the house. I don't think we ever met when you were in the house. And this idea that the only thing you're upset about is not that you were for violence. What you're upset about is that I called you a liar because you said it to my face. So it's really more about this machismo that you have. When in Oklahoma, the media asked you about the refugee welfare programs, the programs you voted to continue funding, it was this whole idea that you were going to transfer it because you were uncomfortable, your anger, low impulse control, causes you to then go after and decide that you're going to go after me as well. And so you say you completely understood that I was assaulted from behind, had 6 ribs broken and part of my lung removed, and that was just fine. That's something that you, I guess, approve of as far as resolution of political problems. When I talked to you privately on the phone, there was no apology. You just said, well, we can let our political difference, go by. And you said a few minutes ago, we can just set it aside. Well, political differences we can, but when you say that you agree with a felon, a Trump-hating felon who attacked me, somehow you think I'm just going to set that aside? Oh, it's no big deal. You know, I lay in pain for 2 months, had 6 ribs broken, 3 of them separated, grinding upon bone for months, had part of my lung removed, and you think that's great and to be extolled. I mean, the sheer lack of any kind of self-awareness that you're going to be leading thousands of men and women who will have the use of force, and there's been great questions in our country about how that will be used, and you think a violent attack is just fine. So I guess my first question is, do you think that justifying that kind of violence sets a good example for the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I didn't know the extent of your damage. When the phone call was made, I made it to you and I tried to talk to you. You didn't engage at all. In fact, you said, get your paperwork in. It's got to be 3 days in between.
You offered no apology.
Sir?
And you offer no apology today and no regrets. Haven't heard the word apologize, haven't heard the word regret, haven't heard I misspoke and it was heated and I made a mistake. Haven't heard any of those words.
Sir, actually, it wasn't heated, and I'm not apologizing for pointing out your character.
Good. So you're jolly well fine, and you want the American public and the people up here to vote, that may or may not vote for you, to know that you supported the felonious, violent attack on me from behind.
I did not say I supported it. I said I understood it. There's a difference.
So that means you really didn't approve of it, just completely understand it. What do you think most people would interpret completely understand to be? Support for or a condemnation of the violence?
Sir, as I said, we can have our differences. It's not going to keep me from doing my job as Secretary of Homeland Security. I'm going to secure Kentucky and take care of Kentucky as much as I am Oklahoma.
If this were a one-off, it would be one thing. If you just disliked me so much that you approved of violence against me, people could just write it off. Well, maybe they hate each other. But really, there's a pattern of this. Let's go ahead and roll the tape.
We can be good as an adult. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand up, Bob.
Oh, hold it. No, stop it.
Say it.
Oh, no, sit down. Sit down. You know, you're a United States Senator. Sit down. Okay, sit down, please.
All right. Can I respond?
Hold it.
If he got up too, would you have gone at it right there?
I would have probably jumped over the dais at that point.
You have to be called out on it. It's not this guy continues to get away with this stuff. And it's just, you know, it's silly, it's stupid, but every now and then you get punched in the face.
Well, go back to the 1800s and 1700s. They used to have canes.
And duels. They used to have duels.
Yeah. Right. And there's a way that men used to settle their differences. I ignored him 4 times to be part of that. And people say, yes, you're supposed to ignore it. Well, you know, I'm not a very good Christian. I try to be a good Christian, and I know people say you're supposed to turn the other cheek. I prefer the David method.
But we need to move from an almost...
By the way, I'm not afraid of Biden. I will Biden.
Fighting?
Oh, I'm Biden. Yeah. I'm in a fight. I'm going to fight. I'll do anything. I'm not a, and I don't care where I fight. It's just fight.
In hindsight, any regrets?
No, I really don't.
So no regrets. In fact, even after your anger had cooled, you were still bragging that if he'd only been brave enough to stand up, you'd have jumped over the dais and taught him a lesson, because that's how men should settle their differences. Do you think fighting as a resolution for political differences is a good example for the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol?
As you can notice over my shoulder here is my good friend Sean O'Brien. Both of us have had conversations. Both of us have shaken hands. And both of us agreed we could have done things different. Sean is someone that has become a close friend. We talk all the time. I've been on his podcast. We've talked through this. That's how you handle your differences. Not like this, Chairman.
I'm glad you guys are friends now and that you've reconciled. But really, it doesn't get to the real point whether or not you think violence is the way we settle things. In the days after the fight, you said, and I quote, sometimes people just need to be punched in the face. Is that still your opinion, that political disputes can sometimes and often only be resolved by violence?
No, I don't always agree with that. I don't believe in political violence. I've made that very clear. But sometimes people do need, theoretically speaking, sir, I get it. It's about character assassination for you. That's the way this game is played. I understand it. And you are making this about you, which is fine, but that doesn't keep me as Secretary of Homeland
Character
Security.
assassination when you were the one lauding the assault. Who do you think started that character assassination? I'm just repeating what you have done in character assassination. I'm repeating your support for the assault. So that's somehow something I started?
No, sir. What I'm saying is you're adding a lot to it.
In the days after the fight, you did many interviews in which you justified the violence as historically justified by precedents, such as caning and dueling. Is it today your opinion that the caning of Charles Sumner was not only justified, but argues still for resolving our political differences with violence?
What I was simply pointing out is some of the rules that still apply to this body. For instance, dueling with 2 consenting adults is still there. I was pointing out what is still
illegal for
acceptable.
170 years. There's no precedent for legal dueling. Even then, they fled the country. It's
crazy.
Do you realize that the man that beat Charles Sumner with a cane, he beat him till he was unconscious? You know why no senators intervened? Because his friend held a gun on the other senators, and he kept beating him until he crushed his skull. That's what you're insinuating is the precedent of the Senate, and that's what you live by. That is a very, very dangerous sentiment. After a half a dozen victory lap interviews where you pointed out that the union guy was just lucky that fear kept him from standing up, Dana Bash asked you if you have any regrets about bringing violence to a Senate committee, and you replied that you have no regrets. Today you've said you have no regrets about being happy, being completely understanding why I was attacked from behind. You had no regrets about, instigating a brawl in a Senate committee hearing. Are those still your opinions?
Mr. Chairman, you're going to have your opinion. I'm going to have mine. As Secretary of Homeland Security, I'm going to bring peace of mind and security to this country, and I'm going to stay laser focused on that.
Senator Peters.
So he was rattled, right? Rand Paul exposed him for the sociopath that he is, right? Psychopath, sociopath, somebody who can't control his anger. Senator Peters, I've watched him follow it up, did an absolutely lousy job. Should have followed up on that same line of thinking, should have pushed it harder. And this is what I mean by it was the Democrats had an easy job. Rand Paul set it up for them. Expose the crazy. That's all you have to do. The world is behind you. The American public is behind you. Donald Trump, the village idiot, politically is on his heels. The war is a fucking disaster of epic proportions. Out of every idiot that he could have picked in the Senate or anywhere to be the next nominee to be the DHS Secretary, he picks this fucking bozo, right? I mean, Democrats couldn't have had an easier time with this. And I only hope that Rand Paul's condemnation in the beginning of this hearing is enough to keep this idiot from becoming the next Department of Homeland Security secretary. And as Gamer Vet Dad made the point here that if Republicans lose Paul's vote, they lose this. And I trust Gamer Vet Dad explicitly because he looks all this shit up. So I feel better about that. But it is just we've got to elect. We're going to win the Senate. We're going to win the House. I have no concerns about that. But I had Salam Bouti on here. Salam Bouti is a candidate in Virginia he's a progressive candidate for Congress. And Salam Bouti was making the point, it's not just about winning back the House and the Senate. It's about who is going to represent you. And right now, at this critical moment in U.S. history, we need fighters. We need people who are not cautious and careful. We need professionals in the sense of being, people who are willing to control themselves and to be professional, because there's a certain dignity attached to being a member of the House or the Senate, even though Republicans have gotten rid of that dignity for themselves. And Donald Trump has completely undignified and made a disgrace out of the presidency and government in general. But there's still but we can be professionals. You can look to Jasmine Crockett or AOC or or Senator Chris Van Hollen or Senator Chris Murphy. You can look to these people as people who are professionals as politicians, but are aggressive and are fighters. And don't fuck around and beat around the bush because they're worried about saying something that's going to be offensive to their communities, to their constituents, or just they want to look like the moderate adult in the room. We don't need that. We need people. This performance thus far that I've seen from Democrats in this oversight committee hearing, or I'm sorry, in this confirmation hearing, has been abysmal. And I don't know if it's gotten better in the last 20 minutes since we've been sort of watching this other stuff. I hope so. Anyway, guys, on that note, I've got to wrap because we've got our daily briefing with Chorus in about 3 minutes. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 live at a time. We just keep chunking through this, and we'll get there. Eventually, we'll get there. We'll get through this. Anyway, guys, I'm just going to wrap Instagram. I have to wrap you guys first because I have to kind of click 2 things to end the live. So Instagram, thank you so much. And the dog realizes that this is coming to an end. And everybody else, I got to go. I love you guys. I'll see you soon.